What's up, everybody? Everybody has them odd little things about themselves that people don't know, or they might not even realize. And they're non-trivial things. They're really things that aren't important. But when you realize it, you're like, really? For example, I love The Breakfast Club. A lot of people from the 80s love The Breakfast Club. You know what I've never seen, though? I've never seen Breakfast at Tiffany's. I've never watched Notting Hill either. There's a couple movies I've never watched that people, especially when you realize that, I love The Breakfast Club. Kevin Costner's Robin Hood. Epic movie. Love that movie. I was a closet Bryan Adams fan. All my friends were metalheads. I was a metalhead. I couldn't admit to my friends I was a Bryan Adams. That I loved Bryan Adams. I really loved Bryan Adams' music. So, I spent the whole summer, almost every weekend, going to the movie theater. I would work all week to save up quarters, nickels, and dimes so I could go watch Hunt for the Red October. One of my favorite movies of all time is The Hunt for the Red October. I loved that movie. I went to the movies and I saw that movie so many times, and I still watch that movie. Every time I watch that movie, I love that movie. That's why I am an Alec Baldwin fan, because it surprises people. People are really surprised that I absolutely love Alec Baldwin as an actor. And even though all of his stupidity and all of his arrogance that led to what happened with the shooting, I still stand by the fact that I do not believe he did anything on purpose. I do not believe in any way he intended to hurt that woman. And I do not like the man one bit when it comes to him outside of acting. Outside of acting, I think the guy is a... Mom always said, if you don't have nothing nice to say about people, don't say nothing at all. I love the man as an actor. Third Rock from the Sun, Hunt for Red October, a couple other movies I've seen him in. But he's always great. He's a great actor. I mean, the guy is a phenomenal actor. But outside of his acting career, I have absolutely no love at all for the man. But with that said, I really don't think, outside of his arrogance, and even with his arrogance, I work in an industry that's based on safety. Drive a truck. What people need to understand is, over time, rules change. And what happens is, you get these people that are from a different era, and they still use those old rules. And we understand why the new rules are put in place, but they are a hassle because we come from that older era. Like for me, there's rules I follow that would be a complete pain in the ass for my dad. My dad was, I'm a legacy driver. My brother was a truck driver. My father was a truck driver. I'm a truck driver. We're a legacy family. There's other people older in the family that were truck drivers generations before. We're a legacy family. And so for each generation, the new generation, there's rules that we follow that, it's no big deal. But for the older generation, they were a hassle. And I think that's what happened. I think somehow, we don't know how the bullets got on the set. I don't think Alec Baldwin actually brought the bullets on the set. I think the guy is a complete freaking asshole, but I do not believe he would intentionally murder somebody on a movie set. Would somebody on the movie set him up, knowing that he's a complete arrogant freaking asshole? That I can believe. So, the bullets got on there somehow. It's either, I can't remember her name, but the one that's responsible for the guns and the bullets, she just completely screwed up and completely failed at her job, or somebody set Alec Baldwin up. It's one of the two. It's really only one of the two. So, it's just, when you get to know people, you're surprised at the way that they look at the world. Because like I said, most people would never think that I would defend Alec Baldwin. Because they don't realize that I actually love Alec Baldwin as an actor. Alec Baldwin. I mean, Sean Connery is my number one favorite actor of all time. Sean Connery is James Bond. Sean Connery is James Bond. There is no other Bond. But have others done a great job of trying to fill his shoes? Definitely Pierce Brosnan. My second favorite Bond. But it's kind of a toss-up, because when Daniel Craig took the place of James Bond, I wasn't impressed with what was it? The first Daniel Craig, the casino one, Casino Royale. I wasn't impressed, but by the end, let me tell you something. I really have a hard time choosing between Pierce Brosnan and Daniel Craig. Daniel Craig became one of the most amazing Bonds of all time. And I completely hated the blonde Bond when he first came on the set. I absolutely hated that guy. Gonna be honest about it, I absolutely hated Daniel Craig. But then I went back and I watched Casino Royale again, and I was like, it is a pretty good Bond movie. I just don't like the blonde Bond. And then I watched the Bond franchise with Daniel Craig, and I really have a hard time picking between Pierce Brosnan and Daniel Craig. It's really a toss-up for number 2 there. The one that almost destroyed the franchise, I can't remember his name, the one with the plaid suit. Actually, Sean Connery had to come back and save the franchise. Can't even remember the dude's name. I just remember that hideous plaid suit. That horrible, and even the dude himself. I mean, even my ex-wife, man, she bought me the complete Bond box set for Christmas, and I remember watching, what is it? All the Queen's Service, or all the Queen's Men, or whatever it is. But is it the 3rd or 4th Bond movie? Sean Connery had to come back and save the franchise because this dude almost destroyed the James Bond franchise. The absolute worst Bond of all time. And every time I remember, my marriage, there was a lot of problems in my marriage, but you know, there's some great memories. And I can't help but laugh and smile about it because we both agreed. And every time she walked in, she looked at that when it was playing, and she was like, my God, that man is just such a horrible actor. What the hell are you watching? I was like, I'm watching James Bond. And she looked at me and she's like, that ain't James Bond. He was just the worst Bond of all time. I just can't remember the dude's name. Absolutely the worst Bond of all time, though. And that horrible, horrible, horrible plaid suit. Don't get me wrong. Born in 1974, so 1978, 1979, guess who was wearing plaid? Plaid suits. Plaid pants. It was my mom's fault, though. My mom was still dressing me at that time. But yeah, I've never seen Breakfast at Tiffany's. I've seen Something About Polly. That's actually really funny. It'll surprise people. I've seen Bridesmaid. I laughed my ass off at that movie. Yeah, I can sit down on a date night and watch a chick flick. I can do it. And I can enjoy a lot of chick flicks. There are some chick flicks that I don't know if I can enjoy. I've never seen Little Women. I don't know if I can enjoy that. Fried Green Tomatoes was kind of pushing it. That was on the extreme of my limitations. So I don't know if I can actually watch Little Women or Journey of the Jeans. I pay attention to things, though. So I know these things are out there. I know, I don't know if I can watch it, but I know about the movie Journey of the Jeans or Journey of the Blue Jeans, Journey of the Jeans, Journey of the Jeans. Because I'm well read. So I have an open mind to things. Like, everybody, I'm a big horror fan. Most of my stories, even now as I write, it bleeds through. Even with my Conan book, it bleeds through the violence from people like Rob Zombie and Quentin Tarantino. The violence that bled through in that book is just, I'm almost embarrassed to say I wrote it. And I've written a couple. The Plantation is really, it's not to that extreme when it comes to some things, but it's still violent. The Plantation is violent. Ocala is kind of violent, definitely gory. My favorite story that I've written so far, though, is The Sinking of the Cleopatra. I absolutely love The Sinking of the Cleopatra. That's actually something that I started, and it actually started as a poem. The story turns into where it's a story, then it goes into the poem being told by the poet, then it goes back into a story about the poet, then it goes back into the poet finishing the story, then it goes back into the story finishing about the poet. I actually started writing that sitting in Osmondton Mills, England, at a place called the Smuggler's Inn. It's a 900-year-old bar. Or the structure is 900 years old, over 900 years old. It's from what I know, most of its time it's been a bar and inn. think it's hard to find all the history on that without being there. I think what it was it started as an inn, then it turned into a farmhouse, then it was converted back into an inn, then it was converted into a bar and inn, then it was converted into a inn again, and now it's a bar again. I don't even know if it's an inn anymore. It's still called the Smuggler's Inn, but I don't even know if it's actually an inn anymore. But sitting in the Smuggler's Inn, drinking a Jackrabbit, I think that's what it was called, a Jackrabbit, an apple ale, I started writing that poem. And that was back in 2015 or 2016. 2015, 2016, somewhere in there. But that's when I started writing that poem, was sitting in the Smuggler's Inn. And so, the sinking of the Cleopatra has been a long time coming. But, it's not a horror story. But it's my favorite story that I've written so far. Since I've started writing again. I have stories that I've written when I was younger that I still look back on, and everybody in middle school and high school, they always wanted to see what I wrote. They always wanted to know what I wrote when we had any kind of writing assignment where you were allowed to use creative writing, because everybody knew I was going to write some kind of cool horror story. I'm not saying I was the Stephen King, and I'm not saying in any way I'm even near Stephen King, but I was the Stephen King of my class. I'm sure, or I imagine, I don't know, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe nobody wanted to hear what Stephen King wrote. Be kind of an irony, wouldn't it? But I imagine everybody wanted to know what Stephen King wrote when he was in school. And that's how it was for me. Everybody wanted to know what I wrote. I was actually really good at poetry too, though. I probably helped half to 2/3 of the jocks in Liberty Middle School and High School, Liberty, New York. Probably helped half to 2/3 of the jocks lose their virginity by writing poems for them. But I have, I don't just read horror. Horror is my favorite genre. Horror is my favorite genre. I just, Vincent Price. Grew up on Vincent Price movies. Big fan of Edgar Allan Poe. Edgar Allan Poe and Stephen King are kind of my literary heroes. But I've read a lot of other. For years, I had my playwright copy of Macbeth. Then I lost it. Then I recovered a new copy of it. Now I'm looking for another new copy of it because I lost it again. But I had, Shakespeare's Macbeth. A couple other Shakespeare. Obviously Romeo and Juliet. I've read the playwright for what's that called? A car called Desire, a train called Desire. It's a play. Matter of fact, I have that on my Audible. A streetcar named Desire. I've read that. I've read A Fiddler on the Roof. I've read To Kill a Mockingbird, obviously. Most people have. I've read The Giver. I've read A Tale of Two Cities. Um, Obviously, I've read Huckleberry Finn, George and the Giant Peach, Watership Down. I like a lot of new independent authors. J.S. Marun is really someone I like a lot of his work, especially the Black Ocean books. T.W. Brown. Let me tell you something. If you're into zombies and you're into the zombie genre and you think it can't get any more intense than The Walking Dead, read or listen to T.W. Brown's All Dead. Just get the All Dead series. Don't. Just get the whole series. Those books made me cry. I mean, literally, I'd be driving down the road and I'd be bawling my eyes out. I mean, I cried when he had to kill the dog in Old Yeller, and I cried when he had to kill the dog in I Am Legend, which I Am Legend, the movie, and I Am Legend, the books, are very different. Two very different stories. Both of them are great. Will Smith's I Am Legend is something complete. It's different, but it's just as good as I Am Legend. I can't remember their author's name, but I have that also on Audible. But in the movie, when he had to kill his dog, I bawled my eyes out for that too. But I mean, T.W. Brown's All Dead. It's one of the most gut-wrenching, horrific things I have ever read or listened to. I mean, I'm almost coming to tears now just thinking about some of the things that, and it, you know, there's some of the things in when I wrote Rise of the Warrior Queen. For Loriana to go through that. And it's something that it's going to bleed into my second book, but it's not going to be as ruthless. But it's going to bleed into my second book. But that just raw, violent, barbaric, just the worst of the worst of humanity that you can possibly imagine. And the thing is, the book is right. I mean, the fact of the matter, you know, even if you're just a survivalist, you really need to listen to T.W. Brown's All Dead series. Because The Walking Dead, that dances on the surface. It only dances on the surface. T.W. Brown's All Dead is just, it's one of the most horrific, gutturally disgusting, but realistic fact of humanity. And if you're a survivalist, or you're somebody that, you're a prepper or a prepper in training, you really need to listen to that. You really need to listen to or read those books. I say listen to them because that's the reality of, if something happened and just everything collapsed tomorrow, that's the reality of the world that we're going to be in. It doesn't necessarily have to be zombies. It could just be the road warrior mentality of all the freaks that are out there. Because let me tell you something. Rob Zombie's The Devil's Rejects is, in my opinion, one of the greatest horror gore flicks of all time. I mean, I remember watching what the hell's the name of that movie? Let Jesus fuck you! Let Jesus fuck you! With the cross. Let Jesus fuck you! Oh my god, what the hell's the name of that movie? The Exorcism. I remember watching that as a kid and thinking nothing would ever top that. And then I watched The Devil's Rejects, and I was afraid of my neighbors. I grew up in the sticks. I'm comfortable in the sticks. But when I watched The Devil's Rejects, I was like, holy shit. There are people like that living around me. I mean, The Natural Born Killers. As awesome as the Natural Born Killers, I thought that was, and it still didn't top The Exorcism in my mind. But it was, when you talked about a movie with brutality and just really pushing the envelope, it was The Exorcist and Natural Born Killers. And then out of nowhere came The Devil's Rejects. And I mean, that movie put itself in its whole new league. I mean, you got the Exorcist and Natural Born Killers sitting out here on first and second base. And here came the Babe Ruth of pushing the envelope, man. The Devil's Rejects was just, holy shit. I love the Firefly trilogy. I actually have my girlfriend bought me I have the tin set. It's a limited edition set. And it was just something, I was joking around. I was like, I need this. I sent the link to my girl, and she wound up buying it for me. So I have the limited edition tin set. It's in a metal casing and everything, and it's still sealed. I haven't even opened it yet. I watch all the movies online. I haven't even opened my tin set yet. I want to, and then at the same time, I don't want to because Rob Zombie is an amazing film director. In all honesty, if there was somebody that, if I could have my dream team for Rise of the Warrior Queen, turning it into a movie, I would want Arnold Schwarzenegger playing Conan, because he's the right age. It'd be perfect. For the final Conan movie, it should be Arnold Schwarzenegger. Because it is. I killed Conan off. But I would want him as Arnold Schwarzenegger, definitely as Conan. I always forget her name, the redhead from the Resident Evil series. I think she'd be able to pull off the part of Loriana. Ironically, it's kind of a toss-up. One's an actor and one's not. One is an actor and one is a influencer. I would want the redhead from Resident Evil. I always forget her name, but I'd want her as Loriana. And then if someone said pick your number one pick for the director, I'd be like Rob Zombie. If they said, okay, give us a number two choice, I'd be like Quentin Tarantino. I mean, there's just no and it's really kind of actually I'd love to see them both working together on it, really. I mean, it's kind of, but yeah. I kind of probably would like to see, I don't know if it would fit, if he would fit the part, but maybe Matthew McConaughey as Chiron. I don't know if he'd really fit that part. I think he, it's physically perfect. Matthew McConaughey would be physically perfect for it, but I don't know if I just don't know if linguistically he could pull it off. But physically, yeah, Matthew McConaughey, perfect for Chiron. Maybe oh, I can't believe I'm forgetting his name right now. He's in so many movies and he's such a great, I really like him. He's a good actor. He was in the horrible Godzilla movie. The only thing that was wrong with that Godzilla movie was that they called it Godzilla. But it's actually one of the worst Godzilla movies of all time. And the only thing was wrong with it was they called it Godzilla. If they called it anything else, that movie, it was an awesome movie. The whole chase scene through New York City and with the taxi. And I mean, the movie itself was amazing. It was awesome. I love it. Broderick. He's also in Must Love Dogs and Room 1402, or is it 1408? What is the name of that movie? 1402 or 1408? Was he the one in Identity also? That was an awesome movie, Identity. But yeah, I'd like to see him as Mariana's father. Peleus. The wizard Peleus. Mariana, though, is I really wanted to tie, because I wrote that book. when my dad passed away. My dad introduced me to Conan. That's why I wrote it. but I was a big King Arthur fan. And I wanted to figure out a way to tie together Conan and King Arthur. And so there's a lot of, the secrets. I'm going to be honest, Loriana goes on to become the Lady of the Lake. She gets empowered by Merliana. And Merliana, if you ain't figured it out already, the name being obvious, but it's generations away, but she's the first protector of the sword. And she's the very first one, and the firstborn from her on forward, her firstborn, and then each firstborn on is always the protector of the sword, because Conan's father's sword gets destroyed, and when they reforge the sword, they reforge it into Excalibur. And Loriana is the one that names it Excalibur in honor of Conan. But that's how I tied it all together. I did it real subtly in the book. I mean, that's kind of just punch in your face Conan and King Arthur. But in the book, I did it really subtly. I just put all these little pieces in place. And the very last line in the book is when she holds up the sword in memory of her father, and she tells the people, I give you Excalibur. And that's the birth of Excalibur, as it's known. Although Excalibur is actually, the origins of Excalibur goes back to the origins of Conan's father's sword, which actually I tell the origins of his father's sword as well. And the only part of the whole book that's not actually based on Robert E. Howard's books and stories is the opening of the book in the village, which is actually influenced by Arnold Schwarzenegger's Conan. But other than that, everything else, once you get past that first couple chapters, everything else, it's all influenced by Robert E. Howard. But I wanted to tie the Arnold Schwarzenegger Conan into there as well, so that's why when I went back to Conan's childhood in the destruction of the village, the death of his mother and father, that's what influenced that, was the first Conan movie. But anyway, I really didn't intend to talk about my book. I really didn't. It's just that T.W. Brown, Stephen King, Dean Koontz, especially T.W. Brown, though. And then, when it comes to, because I wrote the book thinking about it being a movie. So, obviously Quentin Tarantino and Rob Zombie. But, I was talking about them, and that's how I got on my book. But they, those are the influences in that book, and that's where the savagery comes from. But it's funny, and this all started because just talking about the fact that I've never seen Breakfast at Tiffany's. Conversations with me are interesting. You never know where a conversation with me is going to go. I mean, I could start talking I'll be. We'll start a conversation about how to properly cut the hair of a French poodle, and by the end of the conversation, we're talking about Sasquatch molestation. But it's just the way my mind works. Ironically, though, it all makes sense somehow or another. Because when you go back and you listen to it again, you can be like, yeah, how the hell did we start with I've never seen Breakfast at Tiffany's, and we're talking about just horrible, brutal books and movies. My vampire book is gonna be savage. It's not gonna be, like I said, there's things in Rise of the Warrior Queen that I'm really ashamed of. But, I had to show how the character, how Loriana becomes a queen and how she rises to be a queen and how she embraces both the barbarian and the civilized. And so, but I'll never write nothing like that again with that kind of horrible, extreme, violence. But Vampire is going to be violent. I mean, there's one line, I'm not going to give away the scene, but there's one line where Erlich, E-R-L-I-Z-K, Erlich, he's confronting Captain John Carpenter, which is a nod to, yes, John Carpenter. I named a character after him. It's actually one of the main characters. But Captain John Carpenter, Erlich comes up to him and he tells him, he's like, I want you to imagine your worst nightmare. Not the worst nightmare that you're going to tell your psychiatrist, or you're going to tell your wife, or you're going to tell your mother. I want you to imagine that worst nightmare that you keep to yourself because you hope to God nobody will ever find it, because you don't want anybody to ever remind you of that worst nightmare. Now that you know what that worst nightmare is, you remember that worst nightmare, I am that worst nightmare's nightmare. That's a quote by Erlich. It's kind of dark. But Vampire is supposed to be dark. It is it's a vampire. It's a vampire book. There's a reason I call it Vampire. V-E-N-P-I-R-E. And ironically, the same way I introduced Excalibur in Rise of the Warrior Queen, it's going to be pretty much the last one or two sentences you find out the fate of Excalibur. because the fate of Excalibur is told in Vampire. Not going to give away what it is, but so there's a whole journey of books that are going to be in between that are going to start from Rise of the Warrior Queen, and it's going to follow Excalibur. But Vampire, ironically, is where you actually find out the absolute fate of Excalibur. And just like in Rise of the Warrior Queen, at the very end of the book. So it's kind of interesting. The first and last books are and it's the way I write. It's the way I write, though. I actually wrote the very last line for Vampire, and it's the same thing with Rise of the Warrior Queen. I wrote the very last line for Rise of the Warrior Queen before I started writing Rise of the Warrior Queen. I was like, how can I tie that in with Conan? And then I built the whole story around that very last line. And most of my stories are written that way. Ocala is written that way. You know, most of my horror stories are written that way. Ocala is written that way. The Plantation is written that way. The Sinking of the Cleopatra is really not written that way, because Sinking of Cleopatra, like I said, I started writing that as a poem. I actually started writing the poem that's in the story. Like I said, there's a story around the poem. I'm really proud of that. I'm really proud of that story. I love that story. Sinking of the Cleopatra, I'm really proud of it. I tried writing something like that all through school when I wrote. I mean, you know, middle school and high school is when I really got into the dark side of horror. But even before that, all through elementary school, I still wrote. I mean, I was reading and writing before I was even in kindergarten. So by the time I was in school, I was already writing. By the time I was in kindergarten, I was already writing. I was writing stories. But for as long as I can remember, I've always tried to write something like The Sinking of the Cleopatra. I'm really proud of it. It's one of the major hurdles for me. Definitely one of the major hurdles for me. And the fact that I finally wrote it in that style. Not so much that story, but just that style of a story where, like I said, it's a poem, but there's this whole story that wraps around this poem. It's all entangled. It's a major feat for me. Very proud of The Sinking of the Cleopatra. I love that story. Even if I write things that are better, I think Vampire might, and I'm sure I'm going to write into, other things in the future that will be better, but they'll never, it'd be hard to top that accomplishment. That's an accomplishment that I've spent my life trying to create. So, yeah, extremely proud of that story. And it's a short story. It's something that, even if it's not your type of genre, just out of curiosity, it'd be pretty easy to read in, 20 to 30 minutes. Yeah. Love that story. spent a lifetime trying to create something of that style. And I don't even know how to describe the style because, like I said, it's a seafaring story. It's a seafaring poem, but there's this tragic heartbreak all tied in it. There's this reflection of one's life tied in it, a reflection of one's living with guilt tied in it. There's just so much in that story and poem that's all in between. You know, some of it's there, it's obvious, some of it, but then there's all this other stuff that it's just, you have to read between the lines and you really have to reflect on it. It's yeah, it's a unique story. Very proud of that one. It's very deep. I mean, the first time you read it, you're probably gonna just, wow, that was really cool, or that was really stupid. Depending, everybody has their own, everybody's a critic. But yeah, if you go back though and you reread it and you really think about it, yeah, it's really, really, it's a reflection. It's the way everybody looks back on our lives. It's the way we all look back on our lives. Even if we don't admit that we look back on our lives like that, the fact of the matter is we all look back on our lives like that. We look back at our failures and our shortcomings and our losses and our regrets and even the cost of our accomplishments. Even if the only accomplishment was walking away and surviving. The story's much deeper than it is on its surface. There's a lot of meaning in that. A lot of heartbreak in it. There's a lot of hope in it. There's a lot of regret. It's much deeper than it is when you first, it's my best. It's my best piece of work. But anyway, I've never seen Breakfast at Tiffany's.